Very excited to be part of AxCon this year. A little information about myself. My name is Fred Moltz. I am a white male with, I'd like to say black hair, but now at this point in my life, it's a little more sugar, pepper, salt and pepper. I am in my late 40s, and I've been with Verizon for 22 years. Over the course of my journey at Verizon, I've had a number of different roles, but the last role that I'm in right now for the last almost 7 years is running our Office of Accessibility. It is probably the most rewarding role I've had in my career. So I'm going to bring you through a little bit of how we started the program. And as I go through my slides, I'm going to kind of tell you about how we started and kind of where we're at today. So you can kind of see and gauge kind of the journey we've been on so far. And I'm hoping you guys get something out of it. So the first slide, sorry, there we go. Just a little bit of an overview. And this is going to be kind of important as we talk about setting up a program. So, I have this little statement here regarding having inclusive experience for people of all abilities, especially people with disabilities who are utilizing assistive technology. At Verizon, we have come very far in our journey in the last 7 years. Back in September of 2020, our CEO had signed up Verizon to be part of the Valuable 500. And that's a big win for Verizon. I think it's a really big win for the community to be part of the Valuable 500. But the other piece I want to explain to you about is on the slide is regarding stats. So as you are starting up an accessibility program, people are always going to ask you, well, how many people are impacted? How many of our customers? How many of this or that? So stats are always going to be your friends. And as with anything, how you tell the story and how you sell something is going to be really big. So I like this slide here, and the main reason why is I'm showing stats about the impacts of accessibility and the impacts on the disability community nationwide, but I'm also now trying to tailor this into, as you are trying to start up your program, you need that executive buy-in. And so as you can see, our CEO signed up with the Valuable 500. He's a big advocate for accessibility and inclusion, diversity overall. So as you begin to think about creating a program, or even if you've started your program and you want to excel that program, just remember, the more buy-in you get from your senior leadership, the farther you're going to take your program. So that's the one thing I really want to make sure everybody kind of gets out of this is stats are your friends, and executive buy-in is going to be your other friends. Everything else comes in the middle, and we'll go through that as we go along. So the next slide. I'll give a little example of what we've done at Verizon thus far in our journey, and I'm beginning a little bit with the beginning stages. So let me start off in the beginning. So about 7 years ago, I took over this amazing team. It was about 9 months old. There was one employee and a handful of contractors, and I was tapped on the shoulder and said, Fred, hey, listen, we need you to take over the accessibility program and really build it up. And I said, oh, sounds like a plan. So for those that are new to accessibility, let me share with you. I had no accessibility experience, none. I knew what accessibility was. I've had different people in my family and friends and relatives overall that have had different forms of disabilities, but I never understood how it translated to what does accessibility mean and what's an accessibility program. One of my roles at Verizon is running our digital PMO team. And so I went to what I was comfortable with. I knew project management, and I know that's a very robust, repeatable process. And I built our program off of project management 101 fundamentals. Wasn't easy. It's definitely a challenge. So when I first got in there, I was told, hey, we are testing our new My Verizon app. So great. And first question was, I guess it's accessible. And the answer I got was, well, we have some problems. And makes you stop, think, well, why do we have problems? If we have an accessibility program, we have an accessibility team, doesn't everybody know what accessibility is? And the reality was this. Our team had some really good, what I call accessibility champions. That's all the people that work for me. And they were doing their testing. And they were doing really good semi-automated scans, as well as some manual testing. and they were pulling together these defects and throwing them over the fence to our development team. And our development team said, we don't have to do with this. We don't know what accessibility is. So I turned to my team. I said, well, why don't they know what accessibility is? Has anybody sat down and kind of trained them? And the answer was no. So we really had to kind of pause and figure an approach. What are we going to do? And that's where you'll start seeing this Verizon's approach. It's a three-prong approach, but the first part of it was truly education awareness. So we took some time to really go over the WCAG guidelines, sit down with our developers, explain it to them, and eventually, again, because I want to show about where we started and where we're at today, we have actually taken the WCAG guidelines and we have Verizonized them. So what does that mean? We've combed through them, and so where there are some areas where they're a little gray, we try to add some more clarity to them. And if something was maybe considered a low or a medium severity in terms of the guideline, if we thought it needed to be a high, we have now upped that. So we've never lowered anything from a WCAG perspective. If anything, we've upped the bar. So we are now, I think as most companies are, on WCAG 2.1 AA. We use our Verizonized WCAG guidelines, and we continue to do education awareness on there. Really important, the education awareness piece, because you are going to run into people who do not know what accessibility is, or maybe they think they know what accessibility is. But as you are looking at your digital properties and you're looking at how to bring them into compliance and better that experience for everyone, the more you get out and the more education awareness you have, you're going to sell it better. And it goes back into that buy-in. It goes back into that scenario of getting up through your leadership team, your development teams, your design teams. So education awareness is going to be a really big factor. I'm going to skip down over accessibility by design for a second. I want to go to experience validation. This is probably the second most important piece as we were on our journey. And what's experience validation? Well, it started off as production support, in all honesty. It was doing regular, robust, repeatable testing on the WCAG guidelines across our digital properties. One of the things I'm going to share with everybody as a gotcha is don't try and boil the ocean. If you are starting up new, take your time, take little pieces. If you try to test everything, you try to bring everybody into the fold immediately, you're going to fail. And if you don't fail, you're going to trip and fall, and it's going to hurt. And people are going to get demotivated. You're not going to have that passion. You're not going to have that energy that you're all going to be looking for as you're doing your education awareness. So we started off with our app. We started testing that app, defining those defects, providing examples of the experience that we were finding in the testing, and showing where in WCAG there was a valid an error or an area for concern, and we were providing recommendations of how to go about the WCAG guideline to fix it. And then we continued to move on to pieces of our website. Started with the homepage, and then we went into prospects, and then we went into flows. And the reality is we were following where the data points were. And what I mean by that is, where was the highest traffic? So again, not boiling the ocean, right? I could have looked at something that was in our support page for our user guide that was 5 years out of date, but still relative because there may be a handful of customers, but the traffic didn't support it. Doesn't mean it wasn't important. Doesn't mean that we never went back to it. But we wanted to kind of really home in of where can we get the biggest bang for our buck and make a difference. The homepage was a good example. Our prospect flow was a good example. And that's where we started with the production testing. And then our production testing expanded over the last couple of years from just being compliance to being what is the overall experience, because you can meet the WCAG guidelines and be in compliance, but it's really more about the experience. You're going to have different people who are using different assistive technologies, and even if somebody was using the same assistive technology, the way they use that assistive technology can be very different. So you're trying to optimize that experience. You're trying to make sure that you're taking your guidelines and you're expanding it, making it better. And that's where we are now, now in our journey, is getting past compliance. We have a theme every year at Verizon for our accessibility program. This year, it is beyond compliance, optimizing the experience. And it really shows where we're at with our program and our maturity. The third piece, which is in the middle on the slide, is accessibility by design. This is another one it's not easy, but it's taken many years to get here, but the last few years we've been pretty successful with this. I call this accessibility by design. And what that means to me is that anytime we have a new product or service or a web page or whatever it may be that we're getting ready to implement, whatever that initiative is going to be, we have a seat at the table in our stakeholder forum. We sit with our other peers as new initiatives are being brought up, and we have a voice to say, yes, we think there'll be an accessibility impact. And when that happens, I then assign somebody from our team to be part of that project. So that from the beginning, from day one, that project gets approved, we are sitting there looking at designs. We're annotating our designs. Then we're part of the IT development lifecycle, and we are testing along the way, all the way up through launch. And the idea is that we want to make sure we are as accessible as possible for launch. And then once we launch that product or service, we then hand it over to our production support team, that experience validation. So that's really our three-prong approach of how we're handling accessibility in part of our journey. Again, you don't get there overnight. You need a lot of patience. And I want to stress again, please don't try to boil the ocean. You're just going to get deflated. It takes time, but you'll see as time goes on, it starts to click. Instead of you chasing people down, people will start chasing you down saying, oh my God, I need help. I got a project coming out. Did you know about this? And when you get to that point, you know you've done something right. And so as we've been talking about education awareness and selling this, again, there's a couple different things I want to stress everybody. In your early days, an easy way of trying to sell your program and the importance is the compliance card. People hear compliance, people get scared, people want to make sure they're in compliance. Compliance is a scary word for a lot of people. But you know when you've gotten further, when you actually have people who are on board with you and you have leadership that's saying, we're doing it because it's a legal requirement, but at the end of the day, we're doing it because it's the right thing to do. And we talk about our DNA at Verizon. We have now built accessibility to be part of our culture and be part of the Verizon DNA. So it's not just because of compliance, it's because it's the right thing to do. And another piece that you can bring to the table when you're trying to sell your program is your brand is everything about your company. Your brand represents who you are. You want to be the brand that you can say, we do accessibility because it is the right thing to do. And it will show in the way you treat your customers. It will show in how you treat your employees. Again, if you're doing accessibility by design, you're making something good for everyone. And that's probably the easiest way to sell it. Some other things I wanted to talk about in terms of starting up your program is, obviously, you need some consistent practices. You need to kind of build out your program, but you need to have some consistency. So one of the first things that we did, again, me being a project manager at heart, we created a playbook. We documented how are we doing our testing? What type of testing are we doing? When do we use automation? When do we use manual testing? How do we take, test data into this testing? Devices. That's our business. But again, the point is create a playbook, document your thing, and make it a living document, because there are things that you will do today as you're starting off your program that you may not do tomorrow because you are evolving. And there are some things that I can tell you today in our playbook are still there from 7 years ago. But it's nice to see how it evolves. The other is, and this is really big, is defect template. Determine how you're going to create your defects. What's your system of record? How are you going to define that defect? Because one of the things that I've learned throughout my time here at Verizon is you want to create a defect that tells the story. Provide a recording of that experience. Provide step-by-step instructions of that experience that you had through the testing. Because the more detail you provide in those step-by-step instructions, the easier it's going to be for a developer or a designer to read that defect and understand the problem statement. So I would suggest really standardizing your defect templates. And then obviously, again, based on the playbook, is also the standardized testing practices. Figure out what's right for your organization. Are you just a web? Are you app? Are you both? Are you maybe different criteria because of different internal home built systems? Nothing will fit in the box correctly. You have to be flexible, and you have to be able to at least document it and then standardize it so that you have consistency across the board. All right, the next slide here. I'm going to go a little bit more into what we do at Verizon at a high level. This is pretty much more of where we're at today, but this is really kind of giving an idea of where we started. So again, we started with one app, then we went to a home page, then went to a prospect flow. But today, it's all about that three-prong approach that I spoke about in the previous slide. And we have really evolved and matured as a program. So not only do we do testing, but we also work back with our brand team and our designers. And so I think as a lot of companies, you may have a centralized brand guideline or document. We have actually, I think we're one of the few companies I know about out in the world. We have actually built our WCAG guidelines into our master brand guidelines. So when we have designers or agencies that are leveraging that, they understand from day one, accessibility is important to Verizon. It's in our guidelines, it's in our brands, it's part of who we are. The other thing in part of our evolution was we created an accessibility governance team at Verizon. That's part of our education awareness arm. We meet monthly. Verizon, we're a very big company, so we invite anyone and everyone who has an interest in accessibility to come learn something new this month. Or let's talk about a problem you may have, because with different units across Verizon, we may have seen something that another unit hasn't already seen, and instead of trying to reinvent the wheel, let's help each other, let's solve the same problems. And that goes in that whole consistency process of we're working together, leveraging the WCAG guidelines, leveraging our best practices so that when new things pop up across our enterprise, we can just be stronger and better. We do a lot of assistive technology testing, so it's not really just on a device, it's everything you can think of. So if there's an assistive technology that's out there, we're going to leverage that. We're going to test it, because from my perspective, I don't know what my end user is using. There aren't the tools out there that says, oh, this person was using this type of screen reader at this point in time. That technology doesn't exist out there. So you got to be proactive. You have to think about what are the, especially if you're starting off, what are the highest usage assistive technologies? Start there and then start overlaying it with any other assistive technology you can find that you're hearing from the disability community. Again, I'm not an expert when it comes to assistive technology. What I'm an expert in at this point is trying to understand the needs of my customers, and that's all of my customers, and that's what's really important to me. We also go over our products, our services. Again, accessibility by design. Create it in the beginning accessible. Don't wait to launch it. There's a good ROI calculation out there you can utilize. Another way to sell your program to your developers, your leadership team. If you're developing with accessibility by design in the forefront, that means when you launch it, you're not going to have defects, or hopefully you don't have any defects. If you launch something you haven't cared for accessibility, again, it goes against your brand. People can't use it. That's the worst part about it. Maybe you get a lawsuit. Now you got to go back and fix it. You're going to spend more time and money trying to retrofit something that could be amazing, but it's not amazing to everyone. And that's what you really want it to be. We look at design reviews. Like I said, we were part of our operations stakeholdering. We do our production support, and then grooming of user stories. I want to take a little bit of time with this one as well. This is one of those from a Fred perspective where I can say was a gotcha, where I tripped and fell. When I first started with the team and we're getting involved with accessibility by design and getting in part of these projects in the beginning, my first reaction was, okay, we need an accessibility user story. And here's what you find out. If you haven't sold accessibility to everybody and there's speed to market, your story is going to get backlogged most likely. Or maybe one of your stories will get backlogged. And then I thought about it, and I really consulted with a lot of people on my team, and we said, creating a separate user story really goes against the fundamentals and the principles of accessibility. It's supposed to be inclusive for everyone. So why would you need a separate user story? So we shifted gears after a few months, and excuse me. And what we found out was, let's look at all the user stories for a project. If there's an accessibility impact, we will add accessibility acceptance criteria. So if the user story itself gets backlogged, that's okay, because we're part of the acceptance criteria. If the user story is approved and it's going to be launched, well, now accessibility is part of the acceptance criteria. Again, there's tricks to learn. Not everything works for everyone, but I just like to share that one with everybody, because I thought at the time when we were creating separate user stories, it was like the light bulb, like, wow, look at this. This is amazing. We got our own user story, and it didn't work. So we had to stop, rethink, and then improvise, and that's where we went. And quite honestly, it was probably one of the better moves we've done. So that's a lot of information regarding a lot of what we do. It's a long journey. I want to make sure everybody understands that. We have really evolved. Like I said, we started off testing one app. Our company as a whole has moved so far. We have a dedicated customer service team for people with disabilities. It's called the NAC Center, or the VCCD. We have a resource page on Verizon.com, talks about different products and services that relate to assistive technologies and the use together. And I'll show you on the next slide. And then we've gone above and beyond. Right now, Verizon, we are a larger company, so we're very fortunate. We've now also, over the last few years, been looking at very much of how can we better support the disability community outside of these things. Where are some of the societal programs? And so the next slide I'm going to share with you is something that is part of what's called Verizon, Citizen Verizon. And it's a project out there called Verizon Forward for Good. And it's an accelerator program. It's a cohort that we've created. We had over 165 people submit applications, and 7 companies were selected. And the idea was, bring us your ideas, your products, your services you're trying to build out as like a startup company that has a benefit to the disability community. And part of you doing that and getting picked in these 7 companies is, and what we did, we provide each of these companies $50,000 of non-diluted funds. What that means is we just gave them the money. There's no ownership into their product or service. The idea is, what can we do better for the community? How do we take ideas outside of Verizon, leverage our 5G network, and build this out? So these are the 7 companies that we are currently working with today. We provide technology coaching for them. We do mentorships with them. We provide a number of workshops. And the other thing is, we're providing networking opportunities, not only from internally at Verizon to learn more about our 5G network and how they can leverage their product or service on our network, but really like other industry leaders in the accessibility world. And because our idea is share that knowledge, share that power, because we're all on this journey together. And the more we do together, the more we're going to change the world, and the more we're going to improve people's lives as we go along. So that's a lot of where we have started and where we're going. I think, like I said, we're fortunate, we're a larger company, so these societal programs are really important to who we are as a company and part of our culture. And it, again, goes back into our Verizon DNA. But again, I really wanted to share with everybody, it's a journey. It takes time. I've stumbled. It's okay. Again, don't boil the ocean. Take it in small pieces. Do all you can to celebrate your wins. Because when you finally get a win, celebrate it. Be proud of it. Make a big deal about it, and make sure that celebration reaches up to your executive leadership, because that's really key. And I think based on that, Michael, I think if you're ready for some questions, we can probably dive into some of those.
Yeah, I will tell you, Fred, you've got some great questions here from our audience members. And I think it deals a lot with what you've started with and how we can dive into that a little bit farther, Fred. So First, let me just ask, in your presentation, you mentioned that your team was a mix of internal and contractors. Can you
Yes.
explain to us a little bit how your team is divided between internal and external employees?
Yes. So it's interesting, and it's more of a budgeting perspective. So we have allocation for a number of full-time employees, and we have a number, and then we have allocation for contractor support. And our employees and our contractors, they're a mix of people with disabilities and people without disabilities, because we feel it's really important that, like myself, if we look at something from a screen reader perspective, I'm not blind. So I can really give my perspective on something. But I have the ability now to turn to somebody on my team who does have a visual impairment, get their feedback, get their understanding. And that's where we've kind of evolved as well. We've gone from ensuring that we have a very diverse team, but also that we're looking at other companies that do focus groups for us. Or now at Verizon, we're also starting to do our own focus groups as well. Because the more feedback we get in, the better we can build out our program, the better we can take those real life examples and marry them up with the WCAG guidelines and really expand the experience and optimize the experience. But my team is a mix of US-based employees and contractors. I have an offshore team that's primarily doing my production support for accessibility, which works out really well because we pretty much have around-the-clock coverage. And I also have a nearshore team in Costa Rica. So pretty much between the three areas of the world, we're pretty much covered. And so again, because of the way we do funding at Verizon, we have employees and contractor mix, which works out pretty well for us.
Sounds fantastic. Sounds like a lot of diversity on the team too, Fred. I mean, that's part of the key, right? I like how you talked about, having people with disabilities engage you so you understand better from their perspective. So
and Michael, that's the whole piece about us trying to optimize the experience. It really is, because again, if you're going to focus on compliance, and I would agree that was our logic to start off our program. You need to get the fundamentals down.
Yep.
But again, everybody is all about the customer experience, and for me, I'm about all customers, all experiences. And if you can really take in accessibility from the beginning, you're going to make life easier for everyone.
So one of the other things that you mentioned, Fred, that was very interesting is about those WCAG standards. And I think the term you used, if memory serves me right, is you Verizonized. That's a great term. Webster, write it down. It's now a word. Fred's used it in those WCAG standards. And people were very interested on how you Verizonized them and how much of this was brand guidelines versus specifics to the developers of this is the way you need to handle it.
Great question. So when we Verizonized it, it really started off because of our testing. Okay. I ran into a problem one day where I had two different testers testing the same page. And because of their interpretation of the WCAG guideline, one thought it was a high-level defect, and another individual tester on my team thought it was a low-level defect. And the reality was neither one of them were wrong. Based on the way that guideline was written and it was interpreted by them, they both came to a different conclusion, and it was a very logical conclusion for both of them. And that made me stop and pause, because then we were losing consistency. Because now I have a team of, let's say, 10 testers, and they could take the same WCAG guideline and interpret it very differently. And I could have 5 with low priority, 5 with a high. And when that defect got over to my development team, now they're confused. Mm-hmm. Because they're saying, well, it was high yesterday, but now it's low today. So the idea was, we sat down, we looked at it, and we worked back with our compliance and our legal team, and we said, listen, in these type of cases, we're going to raise the bar. If somebody can think it's low, somebody can think it's high, it's going to be high. And it was kind of the justification and why we Verizonized it. It was really more to bring in simplification to our development team, to our testers, and then also from our designers as well. So it took some time to get buy-in on it, but now since we have it, everybody does follow our Verizonized WCAG 2.1 AA guidelines. It's just because we've had people in the past when we were first starting off, they said, well, we went out to W3G, and we're like, nope, pause. You need to follow the Verizon ones. Again, it's more about the consistency factor, and it really did simplify a lot, especially for my testers at the time too. And then developers loved it as well, because then there was consistency for them as well, because now they were seeing, oh, this defect was occurring. It's always a high. It wasn't interpreted to be a low. Because, you know, when you look at defects, this is part of business, right? People are going to look at high defects a lot quicker than they're going to look at a lower defect. So when you start reprioritizing them the right way, at least from my perspective, you're going to get more of an impact and get solutions and remediation done a lot quicker.
Yeah, it sounds like what you really were looking for, Fred, is just that consistency. So people knew if they took something to your team, they were going to get the same thing back, regardless of who did the testing, regardless of who they were talking from experience. So that is great.
Michael, you're spot on. And I will tell you, one of the things that I pride my team on is credibility.
Yeah.
Right. Because you are working with a lot of different people, and there are people who are trying to understand it from a legal perspective, who are trying to understand it from an experience perspective. I think one of the greatest strengths my team has is our credibility, because we are consistent. We don't deviate from our guidelines. It's the same messaging. Everybody's on point, and that's exactly how we do our education awareness, so that no matter who you're talking to on my team, you're going to get the same message. And that's really important to kind of really solidify where you're going with your program.
Great to hear. Great to hear. So one of the things that you credited to, and you know, this touched my heart because I'm a PMP myself. You mentioned about PM processes and really using PM processes. And then you mentioned things like playbooks and defect templates. Did you use existing templates, or did you create something new within Verizon? I mean, were you using a Verizon template, an external template, or was it something your team worked through?
It was a hybrid, which is a great question. So I'm not sure if we were using Jira at the time or if we were using Quality Center. It's been a long time, so I apologize. But for example, like we leverage Jira for our defects and for our user stories and stuff like that. So we create our defect template based on fields within those domains of Jira. So again, from a consistency perspective, was we created the template. It was created from scratch, but we leveraged a lot of the existing fields in Jira, because that was going to guide our tester on how to create that defect. But then the template itself, again, we added specific specifications in there on describe the WCAG guideline that's, you know, has an issue, describe a proposed solution, provide a screenshot, provide a recording depending on the type of defect. So that was all standard, right? And again, to your point, right, PMP, repeatable process. Mm-hmm. And I think it's really important. I actually can't believe I glossed over this. We talk about, you know, creating our program and a PMP. We talk about at Verizon our cradle to grave approach. It's a 360 approach, right? So it begins at the beginning of the project. I talked about how we go through the whole life cycle of design, annotations, IT development, launch, production support, and there's also then the retrospectives. We're constantly reviewing our WCAG guidelines to see if there's opportunity to better adjust them for an experience perspective. We're constantly looking at our test plans, because as new products and services are coming out, as new features are coming out or being developed with technology, whether it's on assistive technologies or let's say website or apps, how do we take that real-time feedback and incorporate into our testing? Because you never want your testing to be stale. You have to revisit it, because what you did, for example, I did 7 years ago, I'm doing a lot different 7 years later, right? Technology has changed. The way people are utilizing our website, our products and our services, it's changed. There are new products and services. So you have to be able to adapt, and you have to be able to take that time to do that retrospective.
Great. Thanks for answering. That's got some great information. A lot of people were interested, and you touched about this a little bit, Fred, just a few minutes ago, but can you take us on how you integrate that customer feedback into the program? Specifically, what does your customer engagement look like? So how do I get it from the customer's hands and feelings to the Verizon accessibility team so we can make it a true vision for the product? Can you take us just through that quick journey?
Absolutely. That's a great question. So there's actually, I'm going to simplify it to say there's probably about two main ways that we look at this, right? And I call it's our voice of the community optimization, where we have feedback on our website, and there's somebody on my team whose job is to go through the feedback and look for keywords regarding accessibility, whether it's accessibility, disability, assistive technology. There's a number of keywords that are looked for in our data mining. That's just an example. And we'll take that feedback and we'll try to decipher that feedback, try to replicate that experience or that ask or that want, or sometimes maybe it's a complaint, you know? So we will replicate or try to replicate what we think the ask is of that customer feedback. The other piece of that is user groups. Like I said, we started doing some user groups now internally at Verizon. We have contracted out with different organizations for user group feedback, whether it's on a specific product. We also are very fortunate at Verizon, as part of our overall program, we do have a disability ERG group that's called Advance. And we have an advanced, what we call the Advanced Accessibility User Group. So there are times where we're getting ready to launch a new product or we're in that life cycle, where we'll actually send out information to users and say, give us your feedback. What do you think? So we have a lot of opportunities to either fix it within a product being developed in real time. We have the ability where we're getting feedback from, let's say, surveys or feedback from our website or app, from those type of mechanisms or user groups. And then we can either build it into the WCAG guidelines, if that's appropriate, or as we're rolling out new enhancements to an existing product or service, as we assign somebody from my team to be part of it, we can then kind of incorporate that feedback in as well. Does it always happen? No. And again, I'm going to talk about patience, but you kind of start to get that balance of, when you can actually make that big change, when it's going to make a difference. And again, depending on where you're at within a project, or if it's an enhancement, you just got to balance that out. But that's how we kind of approach it.
And the next question, I think, is really close to your heart, because I've heard it a couple times, and you mentioned about not boiling the ocean, right? There's a lot to go on. But at the same token, I think you and I can agree, sometimes leadership doesn't necessarily have that patience. They're like, hey, I want accessibility now, get it done. How do you set that expectation for leadership of, you know what, based on our accessibility maturity today, this is what we can do? And I think you would agree, just based on what you've told us today, right, that this is a journey. It's a marathon, not a sprint. What did you do in part of your program to try to set that expectations up with your leadership?
It wasn't easy, but I will say, go back to the fundamentals of what we were talking about earlier, that education awareness. Mm-hmm. Explain what accessibility is. Explain what that problem statement is. Explain the process. I was very fortunate. I've had a number of leaders at Verizon that I've worked for, where they inherit my team, and I'm like knocking on the door immediately. And I'm saying, I need to explain this to you. And they're like, okay. And they come in and they want to understand it. And so for me, it's easy. It's bring up your website, show them where the errors are, take your phone, show them the talk back, let them understand how it sounds, what it looks like. Set those expectations that it's not easy to start the program. It takes time. Show them a maturity model. As you are getting ready to sell your program, be realistic. So when I say don't boil the ocean, start small with your executive presentation, because the reality is you're not going to get it done overnight. It takes years. I am 7 years into this, and I can tell you I feel great about my program. I'm a perfectionist, though. There's so much more that I want. And I think that's why I can tell you, learn from where I say don't boil the ocean, because again, as a project manager, I'm saying, I want these 100 things done. It's part of my project. I want it done now. The reality is you have to take time, you have to sell it, you have to train people. You need people to understand what you're asking them to do or what you're asking them to support. So don't boil the ocean, show maturity model, get some industry stats. Again, back to the part of my presentation in the beginning, stats will tell, explain how there are large companies out there. It's taken them time. There's a lot of information out on the internet. DQ has a lot of information too, in terms of their clients and general stats about maturity. Leverage it. Or if you're starting a new program and you don't really have the executive buy-in, really have nothing to prove then. Take it really small that way and then show, and then again, celebrate the wins of why now you can take that maturity model to where you want it to go.
So, the thing that thinks about experience, I think you and I would both agree, it comes after you need it. And this is why a couple of participants have asked, hey, Joe, hey, Fred, give us your experience now, because I would love it. They have very small teams, maybe 3 people or so. What suggestion you would have for those small teams starting out, that first couple steps that they're going to take, Fred? What suggestions would you have them to start getting that ball rolling when it comes to accessibility?
There's not a simple answer. And the reason why is everybody's business and everybody's leadership has a different expectation. Mm-hmm. So you really need to understand, what is the goal of your small team? What's your action item that you're getting from your leadership team? Is it to start something that can evolve? A lot of times, I've heard this through my years, people start an accessibility program because they have a compliance issue. A lawsuit came in. Immediately, you're going to want, those type of companies are going to go to, I need to hire somebody, I need to fix it, I need to get this lawsuit gone. It's a strategy, and that's why people get the attention they do for accessibility sometimes. I was fortunate. We didn't have that problem. There was a need that was understood from our leadership team that accessibility should be important, and it was go make it happen. So again, I think for every business, it's a little bit different. If you're running into a lawsuit, you're running into complaints, you're going to want to make sure that obviously you're going to remediate whatever that main issue is, and then expand out from there. Because that's going to probably what's on your leadership team's mind is you have issue X, and that needs to be solved for. Once you prove it, then go expand it out. Now you have a different type of scenario. Maybe it's the education awareness piece of it, because again, that's really important too, right? Because if you're not sharing and teaching people what accessibility is, train them on accessibility, train them on the tools they can use on every day to develop your products and services, your digital platforms, how they're going to do it. So education awareness, to me, that's really important to start the conversation and start sharing your vision. And then again, unless you have people who are really bought into it and you have a small team, you got 3 people, then maybe depending on the size of your company, maybe you have somebody who can focus on your strategy, your training, your education awareness. Maybe you can start diving into going to different conferences like AXCON, bringing back examples. Have somebody who's dedicated to accessibility by design. Maybe your company only has a few releases per year or 1 or 2 new products that come out per year. Maybe you can have the bandwidth to do that. And then obviously the compliance and the production support piece of it. Again, I have a 3-prong approach. That's how I tackle it. You give me an example of 3 different people. Again, every company's different. Everybody has a different reason of wanting to do accessibility. Again, I'm of the mindset, you do it because it's a legal requirement, but more importantly, you do it because it's the right thing to do.
So Joe, one of the themes that keep coming up that I love hearing you say is about that education, right? We showed it in your 3-pronged process. You've mentioned that a couple of your answers. We have participants who are interested. If you could just help us understand, how do you run an effective accessibility education program across things like engineering, designs, product verticals? And did you turn to external partners, or was that something that you developed in-house?
Hybrid approach again. a lot of things we've done, we've been hybrid approaches. And let me tell you why it's always a hybrid approach. Funding, no matter what business you're in or what organization you're in, for whatever department you're in, you're always vying for funding, right? So you have funding for X, Y, and Z. That's your yearly budget. How you leverage your budget is pretty much up to you most times, right? So I can take my budget and I can hire, let's say, 5 people, or I can take my budget, hire 3 people, and I can go out and do some outside, get some outside consulting, whether it's on training development, so on and so forth. So what we have pretty much done is we have set out, so we've created trainings in partnership with DQ that we are a refresh of some trainings that are going to be rolled out again this year, where it will be training that's offered to everybody across the enterprise at Verizon. And that was in partnership with DQ. So again, I think it's a really big win for us that we were able to partner, get a Verizon piece within some of the DQ training and make it more palatable to everyday Verizon employees and contractors. The other thing we have worked on is we've actually created some of our own internal trainings that are on our centralized learning portal that we've done as well. And then I always take the opportunity every time I have a VP or a director or whoever it may be that hears about something that we're doing, I will always offer up to them, I will come to your staff meeting, I will do a 15-minute presentation, I'll do a 30-minute presentation, I can give you an accessibility 101 for you and your directs. I can take that, I can tailor it to exactly what your organization is responsible for here at Verizon, so we can make it more meaningful if that helps. So we're constantly always doing that. And then I will say where we expand out is our governance team, right? Again, we try to bring in guest speakers. We talk about relevant products and services at Verizon, some of the challenges, how we overcame those challenges. And there's 2 events that my team specifically we host every year. Global Accessibility Awareness Day, where we plaster that all over our intranet site. We do different workshops throughout the day. We celebrate GAD every year, and we try to make it as impactful and in everybody's face as possible. And then the last thing that we do is usually in October, it's our annual Verizon Accessibility Tech Expo and Summit. And we're headquarters out of Basking Ridge, New Jersey, where we have thousands of people that come through our building every single day previously, before COVID. Excuse me. And so what we would do is on day 1, we actually set up different stations right outside of our cafeteria. So as people are coming in for their food, they're seeing this, what's going on. So we have swag and we're educating people. We've had DQ come in and do your empathy lab. We show how we've got different assistive technologies, different products and services, how they relate to accessibility and what we sell, what we do. We talk about, our big print bills for customers with visual impairments or prayer bills. Again, just to really get people hooked in and want to learn more. And again, I will tell you, swag is swag. You give that away, people love it. So we do those type of events and they're really powerful.
Cool. All right. So it looks like, Fred, we're out of time, but I want to let you have the last word here. For all that you've taught us today, for the questions you've answered, thank you. Is there something you want to make sure you leave us all with, just to make sure that we've got something top of mind from what you've talked about today?
I think my best advice to anybody, whether you are starting new or you're still pretty far along your journey, it's an oxymoron, but here's my words of advice. Patience and persistence. You need patience, but be persistent with your agenda and you will go far places.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that, Fred. I can't thank Fred enough for his experience and his time. Thanks for everybody for attending. A friendly reminder that you can always come back and watch the recording at any time of Fred's presentation if you might have missed some of his notes or what he's talked through. I hope you've enjoyed the first day of AXCON. We thank you for attending, and I want everyone to have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you tomorrow. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.